Hey guys, welcome back to MFO. This week there's been a lot of talk about another DQ coming down the road and a potential that Scott Martin is involved in another situation involving getting information for the upcoming B.A.S.S event on the Pasquotank River. I'm not going to talk about the specifics of that situation. First of all, from my understanding, he's going in and doing a lie detector test. That's my term. I think B.A.S.S calls it a truth verification test. And so, they're going to make their determination on all of those things. So we're not going to get into what did he do or did he do it or didn't he do it or anything like that. But I do want to talk a little bit just in general about, the reality is our chicken's coming home to roost. What that saying means, and is that what's going on? We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Mark Fisher Outdoors, everybody. I'm Mark Fisher. The reality is that I started tournament fishing on the pro circuits years and years ago, and I'd be staying in houses with anglers that had a lot more experience than I did, and traveled with them, and there would be these discussions at dinner or sitting around, after practice days, and guys' names would come up. Oh, this guy is getting information, or that guy is doing this or that. And it's interesting how, again, back in the day when I didn't really know these guys too well, to me it was quite a shock, and it was, to be honest, it was a little deflating in that, wow, I didn't realize that those guys had that reputation for, behaving that way, getting that kind of, getting information when they weren't supposed to, or doing these things or doing those things. And at that time it was talk. It was, nothing more than rumors and hearsay and that kind of thing. But it is interesting that some of the same names that I was hearing back then are still names that you hear now, today. And there's obviously a lot more talk about things because the internet and YouTube channels and things like that kind of get that information out to a lot of people. And there's a lot of focus right now on, cheaters, because, and again, I'm not denying this, guys. You have a YouTube channel, you put something out about a cheater, you're going to get a lot of clicks and views and things like that. And so there are, you get paid to talk about negative things. Now, here's the thing though. There's a focus, a spotlight on if somebody's doing something wrong. And believe me, as a tournament angler, I want to have a level playing field. I don't want to be going up against guys that have a ton of contacts where they can just go and get waypoints and things like that. You want to have and I think most of the competitors I know feel the same way about it. But if you combine the attention that people who break the rules can get through social media, and you combine the other factor, which is one of the rules about information is not only you're not allowed to get information, but as a competitor, if I know something about a competitor getting information, I'm required to say something and to convey that information. I would be breaking the rules if I knew that the guy standing next to me was getting information illegally and I didn't say anything. Then I would be just as guilty of breaking a rule as he was for getting that information. Okay. And as long as I'm clarifying rules, let me clarify something else, because I've seen this in my comments a ton, and I need to clarify this. If on the other side, a guy walks up to me at the bait shop and says, hey man, they're biting they're biting red rubber worms on Kentucky Lake. That's not a rule violation. Okay. I do need to call my tournament director and tell them that I got that information. But as long as I didn't ask for it, that is not a rule violation that somebody just walks up on the street and says something and I'm now disqualified from that tournament. It's the act of soliciting or asking for that information that is the violation of the rule. And again, that asking has to be done within the time constraints that the tournament organization puts on, whether it be 30 days or a year or whatever it is that the tournament organization puts on. But let me get back to the point that I'm making. So if you combine the social media, we want to make sure that if somebody's cheating, it's getting out there and people know about it. That's one element that's making this more spotlighted and kind of showing people what's going on. But the other is that as a fellow tournament angler, there's another rule that says we are obligated to, I'm going to snitch them out, tell about it, narc on them. And if we don't, we're just as guilty of breaking a rule as they are of getting that information. So when you get into this situation where a fellow angler hears about, hey, I heard that so-and-so got information, or now as a competitor, I need to say something about it, even when that might negatively impact me, either based on my sponsorship agreements or based on, hey, he's my friend or whatever. I still have to make sure that gets told to the tournament organization. Otherwise, I'm guilty of breaking a rule, and I could find myself being the topic of a YouTube video or something like that. So I think that those two things, plus the fact that tournament organizations are getting the idea that, hey, we need to crack down on it, not only because our anglers are asking us to crack down on this, but because it helps the public's view of our organization if we're holding our anglers accountable. Too many times there's been kind of this view from the public that, well, the tournament organizations just sweep everything under the rug and they don't want to talk about it. And that's been kind of publicized. And so now the tournament organizations are saying, hey, if we hear about this, we're going to investigate it. We're going to do something about it. Our anglers want it. The public wants it. So you've got the tournament organization who's actually, listening to these concerns. You've got the social media where there's a big ability to get that information out there. And you've got the anglers who are like, hey, the rule says I got to talk about this. I got to tell someone about this because I know about it. And if I don't, I'm going to get in trouble too. So I think there's kind of this whole big kind of movement that it's time to shine a spotlight on those guys that have maybe for years and years and years been operating under this kind of, hey, I can do this. Yes, it's a rule, but it's not a rule that anybody really cares about or not a rule that anybody catches anybody doing. So I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. Well, now, like I said, maybe the chickens are kind of coming home to roost. So I don't know what you guys think about this altogether. The reality is that personally speaking, I'm not going to go and fault B.A.S.S for doing what they're doing to investigate. We'll see what they end up coming up with. Again, and I've said this many times, it's a difficult rule to police, but if you're going to have the rule, I feel like you need to police it as best as possible. And it seems to me like that's what B.A.S.S is doing. I remember not too long ago, I did an episode where I complimented the NPFL on their DQ of an angler who asked for information in the middle of a live tournament and said, B.A.S.S, you need to do, well, it seems like B.A.S.S is doing that. And so I absolutely can't fault B.A.S.S for investigating. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of this truth verification test that's supposedly happening later on this week or this weekend. So, guys, I'd love to hear your opinions on it. And I appreciate you tuning in. And we will see you again tomorrow for another episode of Mark Fisher Outdoors. Take care, everybody.